So Starfield had a new update a couple days ago at this point, which added FSR 3 to the game, as well as frame gen of course, and on the ROG Ally I had fantastic results, above 60 FPS pretty much on average. So I do want to see how this runs on the Steam Deck, because when it first came out it was unplayable in New Atlantis and other areas. So hopefully with FSR 3 as well as frame gen, a stable 30 is at least doable with this system. Alright, first things first, I'm playing at 720p, that is the max for this game I believe. I am forcing 800p in the settings, but regardless, the game is running at 720p and at the lowest preset. And our first test will be without FSR. So I'm going to disable this, as well as the upscaling, and no frame gen. And we'll come back in, enable it all, and see what we can do then. Cool. Alright, loading in, and from the aspect ratio, it does look like it's running at 800p, as the overlay is being cut off. If it was 720p, the overlay would be aligned with the game itself. And in New Atlantis, we are sitting at around 20 FPS, which is about what we had at release. The game isn't stuttering or lagging, it's doing decent. Alright, now indoors, FPS is sitting in the 30s and the 40s. It's okay, it's not too bad. And again, the game isn't stuttering. So far, it's playing decently well. But going down here, we should see the FPS fall down quite a bit. So next to the fire here, shoot it, and yeah, the FPS falls down into the 20s. So the same as New Atlantis. Okay, last location, I'm going to go on to Mars and just explore the planet, and we'll see how we go there as well. And yeah, on Mars, we're sitting in the high to mid 20s and the 30s. Yeah, it's not too bad. Sadly, it's not consistent, but for some, this can be playable. Alright, that was the control test done. Let's go ahead and back out, enable FSR as well as frame gen, and do it all again. And yeah, with FSR active, as well as frame gen, we are sitting in the high 20s and the 30s. But sadly, the game is very stuttery and very choppy, so not playable at all. It actually feels like a worse experience than what we had before. Alright, back indoors guys, and yeah, FPS wise, we're now sitting in the 50s and the 60s. So yeah, it's definitely a decent FPS bump, and the game, for the most part, feels okay. It isn't fantastic. It does feel like the game is stuttering when I turn the camera around, but again, it's decent. And going down here, let's shoot the barrel. And yeah, the FPS falls down into the mid to high 40s. So right here without FSR, we're set into the 20s, I believe. So around a 20 FPS increase with FSR as well as frame gen. But again though, the game does stutter. So even though the FPS is above 30, the game doesn't feel great. Alright, last location, let's go on Mars. Let's see if we can get above 30 FPS there as well. And yeah guys, so far, the game is pretty stuttery, even on Mars, which is not really super packed. It's just me and this guy. And yeah, going outside, the FPS sits into the 40s and the 50s. So again, a decent FPS bump, but the stutters and the hitches are ruining the experience for me. And yeah guys, at 30 FPS, the game does stutter still. It isn't great. As you guys can see, it feels pretty off. So even with a 30 FPS cap, the game runs like crap. Okay, let's back out, load the resolution, come back in. Alright, now playing at 800 by 500. Let's see how it runs. It looks far worse, but hopefully we can get a couple of extra frames out of the system. Okay, in New Atlantis, we're sitting in the low to mid 20s now, instead of the low 20s, and occasionally falling below 20. So doing much better there. The game is stuttering occasionally, but it's not as bad as FSR. And right here, we're sitting in the high 20s even. That is pretty nice, almost the 30s. But yeah, sadly not very consistent. And back indoors, the FPS sits into the high 40s and the 50s. So around 10 FPS lower than FSR at 800p. It's not too bad. And with the fire, the FPS falls down into the mid 20s. So yeah, it's decent. It can be playable for some, I guess, but I think for most people, this is not playable still. But it does run much better than FSR at 800p. And back on Mars, FPS is sitting in the mid 30s. Let's turn back around. And it falls down. Hey, still in the mid 30s. Cool. And again, the game doesn't stutter. It feels much better than before. And you guys, sadly, in New Atlantis, we're still sitting in the high 20s and the mid 20s. And the stuttering is kind of insane. And as you guys can see, the graphics aren't great either. So yeah, sadly, I think FSR 3 on the Steam Deck, at least for Starfield, is a skip. I'm going to go ahead and test out the other areas anyway. But yeah, New Atlantis is pretty unplayable. It does fall down below 30 FPS, and if you enable FSR with frame gen, it is just far too choppy. Back indoors for the last time, and I just want to show you guys the stutters. As you guys can see, it does hitch occasionally, and the FPS wise, we are sitting in the 70s and the 80s. That's pretty cool. And with the fire, it falls down into the 50s. So yeah, although the FPS is higher than before, it is a worse experience for me. And yeah, on Mars, we're sitting in the 40s and the 50s. Game is very choppy again. It's very stuttery. Turn it back around. It falls down into the high 40s and the low to mid 50s. So yeah, there we go, guys. That is Starfield with the FSR 3 update. It is pretty disappointing, to be honest. On the Ally, it ran much better. It actually ran at 60 FPS pretty much, and it was a good time. So yeah, that's about it, guys. Thanks for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed. I'll see you guys next time for the next video. See you guys there.